Thanks for the opportunity to share my story. And I think you hit on, most of what I'll be talking about, not just Winnslie Parkway, um, but also the greening of Ravenswood. And as much as I've learned, I mean, obviously, I'm not the best person to talk about that because I wasn't here, but I have learned a lot from Stephen and from Gene and other people that were here then. And yeah, so let's just begin. This opening shot is Winnslie Parkway. And we're located on the Ravenswood Metra embankment between Winnemac and Ainsley Streets. And our original parkway is 600 feet long and 40 feet wide. And let's just say that this talk is mostly about how did I get here. At least we'll start out with that. It wasn't actually with a master plan or a big vision. It was a lot. It was a lot simpler than that. It just started it with me moving into a new home. My husband and I moved into Ravenswood from Lakeview, and we bought a townhome across the street from what is now called Winnslie Parkway. And it was well maintained. You'd hardly know the railroad tracks were there because it was so grown up and so beautiful. And normally you might not think of living next to the railroad tracks, but when you have a beautiful garden in front of your home, it sort of takes away any of the other inconveniences of having trains go by. So the other nice thing is that maintenance was being stably funded by our townhome association, and it's just a perfect situation for us. We found out later that this parkway was built back in 1999. It was called the Winnemac Ainsley Parkway back then. And this is an interesting story as to how this got put together. There's another shot of the parkway here from the north end. The entire parkway was conceived and built by our neighborhood landscape architect, Stephen Christie, who has already been mentioned by Gene, and who I'll mention a lot more later. This area was completely flat initially, and the worry was that it was vulnerable to angled parking. And with Gene's approval, Stephen organized volunteer excavators and a construction crews to bring in large amounts of soil, obviously truckloads and truckloads of soil, and he built up the embankment and he constructed walls around the trees with broken sidewalk pieces. And he built stairs and installed the trees in a way that saved money by buying them from nurseries that were going out of business. And the total cost was about $9,000, and that was even donated by the developer of the townhome complex. So Stephen donated a year of his own labor. Others donated equipment and workers. And in short, Stephen basically said that the entire stretch would almost certainly be angled parking today if it wasn't for this effort. So when we moved in, another shot of the parkway looked like this. Again, just amazing, beautiful park. Another shot in May of 2013. And then a sudden change. 1 year later, the parkway was gone. It was cleared for rail infrastructure. The bulldozers came and took away the trees, and we were left with barren dirt. And before this happened, I caught wind of it, and I contacted the ward office at the time. Of course, Gene wasn't there, but they actually were willing to sit us down with the railroad and invited Stephen Christie along as well to have a chat about why this had to be done. And Union Pacific addressed the work, why it had to be done, and Stephen basically said, look, I hate to see this happen, but I can make it better for you. And he drew up a plan. His plan is shown here. You can't really see the details, but one thing you probably can see is that we asked for a walking trail, and he also decided to put in seats. And I think this made all the difference in our parkway. Because as beautiful as our earlier parkway was, it didn't have a pathway or seating, and it didn't invite people in to use the park. But after this, it made a huge difference. So I want to mention the fact that it wasn't just Stephen at this point, but it was also Anna Arbetter and David Byer from Futurity Incorporated they came up with the detailed engineering and construction drawings. And so a lot of obviously engineering went into this project, because you can see the massive of effort involved. These were the plantings that had to be put in. These were the stones that had to be laid. This is not just a walk in the park, so to speak. You needed massive machinery to move these blocks, and that's what happened. And so despite the fact that what happened was not great, we were pleased that the ward and Stephen and everybody came to our aid to give us a parkway back. And it didn't look that great initially. As you can see here in 2015, after 1 year, everything was pretty pathetic looking in terms of the trees. People were saying, "Hey, we got to plant more trees," but we really just had to wait for the garden to grow in. But at that title of the slide says watering bags were installed. Now that's another story, that even though the trees were put in the pathway and the stones, nobody thought to put in a watering budget. So thank goodness for the fire hydrant and the water flowing underground, because we had to water the trees ourselves. Stephen gave us the tree bags, and we put them on. And this is where our head gardener enters the story, Keith Clausen. He's kind of a handyman. He's a very handy man, and he developed a watering system using the fire hydrant and hoses and the tree bags. And I actually went down to obtain a city permit to use the fire hydrant to make it legal. And for one full season, the bags were filled regularly, and we didn't lose a single tree. And I want to thank Keith. This is Keith Clausen, our head gardener. He's the main volunteer behind Winnslie Parkway's success. He's been there planting, watering, pruning, and now serving as an Openlands tree keeper. And we owe a lot of... Yeah, he's really getting into it. He was totally naive about gardening when it started, but now he's learned a lot over the years. Obviously, I and Keith and everybody on Winnslie Parkway has learned so much from Stephen, who offers his knowledge free of charge. And not just us, but he walks up and down the whole Ravenswood corridor talking to people about their gardening. Of course, he's just a very generous guy. So a year after the watering, things already started looking better. The grass was looking better. We had our first volunteer event, because we didn't even know, but wood chips break down over time, and we had to replace them. So this was the first volunteer event we had to create to maintain our parkway. And it became an annual tradition. We do it every year now, and we have a lot of fun, and we kind of tie it into our fundraising. This is the group that was there for the first year, and you can see Keith is in the upper left-hand corner, partly in the shadow, which is fitting, because Keith always works quietly in the background, but he does most of the day-to-day work. So this is quite a few years later. You can see the elements of the new design, of Stephen's design. We have that distinctive stone seating and a continuous walking path. As I mentioned, it invites the community to connect with nature and to each other. And so it's just a great design. Everybody loves the design. This is the north end now. Totally different than what I showed earlier in 1999. It had been completely reconfigured. We have red buds there now, and the tulips were planted by Keith, and it's a freshly restored path there. So I'll just mention one more thing. That's Stephen Christie, as you all probably know. His design emphasized native trees and plants. He's very concerned about using natives, and but he was also pragmatic in that he included a substantial lawn. And this is basically just due to his practical urban landscaping experience. So I'm going to go to the next big shakeup. This is another surprise that we got faced with. Besides having our parkway taken down, the next thing we had is our money was gone. Our townhome association decided after 20 years that they were no longer going to fund the maintenance of the parkway by themselves, and they wanted to withdraw that support. as an organization. Now, we didn't lose the support of individuals in our organization. The ones that appreciated the Parkway kept donating, but so it was a turning point. 2019, what are we going to do? We have no stable funding anymore for upkeep. What's going to happen? I didn't know what we were going to do, but I knew we had to do something. And actually, the first person I asked for a donation asked me in return, well, is this tax deductible? And I said to myself, no, we don't have that possibility. And I said to myself, well, if this is the first person, and what are the next people? I mean, we're going to have to form a nonprofit. So at this point, I mean, this seems like a lot of effort, and it was, and I must say, but it opened up more doors. We realized that in order to survive, we had to broaden our donor base, and so we now have a 501c3 called Friends of Winnslie Parkway. Oh. So it was established in May of 2019, and we've kept it going ever since. And the board of directors is shown here. That's Roy Wesley, Tim Gillingert, and myself were the board of directors. We've had 2 previous board members that were with us for several years, and now we're down to just 3 people. But transforming into the nonprofit allowed us to get a broader base of funding. Our maintenance changed as well. We went from Juan Perez to Freddie Shanmeyer, and we went to Freddie because of his long-term relationship with the Ravenswood corridor, and the fact that he has a very substantial organization to do landscaping, and it's also opened up partnerships. We began aligning with neighborhood and city planners, where we got closer to the 47th Ward, to Josh Mark and Matt Martin. We now part of NeighborSpace. We're part of Openlands, Tree Keepers. We work closely with the Ravenswood Neighbors Association, with the Greater Ravenswood Chamber of Commerce. I'm on the 47th Ward Green Council, and we also began participating in the 47th Ward EcoFest events, and this helps provide a support system for us. So everything looked good. That was 2019, and then the Winnslie Parkway expansion concept came in again, and I said to myself, what have I done? This is, it was, beyond Winnslie Parkway, why expansion matters. Well, I mean, I guess why did this even come up? I mean, why take on more? We already were raising $5,000 a year for maintenance. This expansion project would double that at least. So there was a lot of hesitation, but the real motivation occurred, to me at least, and I'm sure to Stephen and David and everybody in our neighborhood, that walking down the street and seeing this, and so this was our major motivation. The idea to replace the trash with gardens started years ago. This started with the greening of Ravenswood, at least, and this is in the 1990s and early 2000s, and this is history that I've had to learn over the years. I don't even begin to say I understand the scope, but I do have a few photographs that sort of give me an idea. And this is one photograph of Gene and Jane Cooperman, who I understand was a major player. Fred and Kathy Shanmeyer were, they were back there at this time, and they're still doing it. So this is an amazing group. John Clonder, of course, being the guy that approached Gene and said, look, we need to do something. Gene told him, okay, you're going to be the honorary chairman of the Greening of Ravenswood. But Gene and the Greening of Ravenswood raised substantial funds over, it was 20 years or so. Ravenswood Hospital donating $40,000, the Chicago Northwestern Railroad contributing $600 per month for trash removal. It was ward prioritized and a corridor-wide campaign. Here's a shot of Gene planting a tree in front of the Chicago Northwestern building at Ravenswood and Lawrence, one of many events. Another one where the mayor presented a formal letter of appreciation to Gene and the Greening of Ravenswood organized for their environmental work, and the fundraisers, the black tie events that I'm sure were very helpful in raising lots of money. And, it wasn't just raising money for the Greenway, but there was also a huge environmental problem in the 47th Ward back then. And Gene, heard about the massive tree losses from the Asian longhorn beetle. And he led a large-scale replanting throughout the Ravenswood corridor, which affected public and private areas that were restored at no cost to property owners. So for nearly 2 decades, Ravenswood treated its embankments as a civic landscape and not leftover space. We're going to go back to the Winnslie Expansion Project. So from the greening comes a new momentum. Decades passed, as you can see. We're talking about 2021 now. Stephen, Christy, and David Byer held to their vision to expand along the corridor. And, how could a Winnslie expansion be installed with such limited space for a trail, though? So we not only have the funding and organization problems with the expansion area, but we also had a space problem. So the existing expansion area was extremely narrow. You can see here where the green area is underneath the trees. That's essentially the usable space for the landscaping and the trail. So to make a real parkway trail possible, one of two things had to happen. Either the Union Pacific would have to move their fence back, which was our preferred option, or the city curb would have to shift outward about 11 feet. And shifting the curb out meant converting angled parking to parallel parking. And I conducted a comprehensive parking study, and the study showed that much of the angled parking here was consistently underused. In other words, valuable street space was being taken up by parking that people weren't actually using. Now, I realized this was put in for a different purpose when the Newark Electric was in the building on the corner of Lawrence and Ravenswood. The employees needed a place to park. Well, that company moved out, and we still had angled parking, and that wasn't being used. So it turns out we had a new breakthrough, and that was when the 47th Ward Infrastructure Project was spearheaded, or a 47th Ward Infrastructure Project was spearheaded by Josh Mark and Matt Martin and CDOT, and that created an opening for us. It said they would be making streetscape improvements along this section of Ravenswood, and they offered to bump out the curb 11 feet and reconfigure parking with one important condition, that Friends of Winnslie Parkway would agree to maintain the new green space. That meant we were formally accepting long-term responsibility, which meant more fundraising, more volunteers, more commitment. But opportunities like this don't come along once every generation, so we had to say yes. So the next step was for us to use our connection to NeighborSpace, who used their connection to the City Department of Planning and Development, to present David Byer's expansion area budget to the City Council Committee. I gave a brief talk on behalf of the Winnslie Parkway, and Meg Gustafson made an extensive presentation to the committee on our behalf. And the committee approved the $300,000 budget plan so we could move ahead with the next steps, which were design and installation. Now, of course, the bumping out of the curb and everything, that is not included in the $300,000. That was CDOT's budget, so that was something we didn't have to fund. But we did have to fund the design and installation of the landscaping. And so David Byer led 3 community meetings last year where the expansion plans were presented and debated. And he talked about restored green space, the continuous path, safety improvements, and we used repurposed railroad materials. Of course, again, we're using the railroad abutment blocks, which were in large supply, and you could see they were all along the parkway for many years. And we also had other repurposed railroad materials to create architectural features. So this is the angled parkway we're talking about before anything was done. And this is the kind of work that had to be done to remove it. Big equipment came in, and it took many weeks of digging and and loading trucks full of material. So I could go on. I have lots of videos on this, but I'm going to spare you and just go right to the final part, to the actual redesign, creating space for the landscaping plan while also improving parking, improving by creating parallel parking. Bike lane was installed, and pedestrian safety was included by putting in elevated crosswalks. So you can see the 11 additional feet here. The UP fence to the right, whereas before the curb was 11 feet further in. And so this is what we have now. The next steps are to further install the Futurity landscaping plan, and that's being done by Asimov Landscape Company. And that's where we are at this point. We're hoping for installation starting in the spring, and we're hopeful of. I mean, David has an amazing plan. We have all the videos for the plans on our website if you wanted to see all the different types of trees and things that are going to be planted. So that's the end of Winnslie Parkway, but I guess I want to also mention that we are now part of a broader movement in the Greenway. That there are already 10 individual gardens along the corridor, from mega to mini gardens. I guess you would call Montrose Metra gardens mega, and mini would be, well, I'm going to go through the gardens very shortly. And we also have volunteer litter removal. I mean, this is all, grassroots stuff. Unfortunately, we don't have it like Gene would have done it, but this is what we're left with. So let me just say, each garden has its own personality and priorities now. They're determined by the immediate neighborhood or community group that runs it. So this shows the emerging groups of individual gardens along the corridor. From the south end, we've got Montrose Metra Gardens, which I mentioned. Then there's the Sunnyside Savannah. Then there's the Ravenswood Metra Station. Then the Winnslie Parkway Expansion Area. Then Winnslie Parkway itself. Then between these gardens, there's a lot of dead space, of course. Now, north of that, we have Christie Gardens. Between Foster and Berwyn, we have a garden tentatively called Winster Gardens, which is planned, hasn't been installed yet. Further north, we've got the Want Garden, the West Andersonville Garden, then a small garden called Venoni Gardens, named for the resident who created it. And farther north still, the Ware Gardens, which is the West Edgewater area residence gardens. And individually, these are all unrelated projects, but collectively they point to a powerful possibility that if we could connect a ribbon of green space 3 miles long with a walking trail running along Ravenswood, that would be great. I mean, it would be better if we had a coordinated, overseen effort by the city, but in fact that doesn't seem to be happening. We at least could have these gardens put in walking trails so that we could have a coordinated, connected green space along the corridor. I guess that's the best we can hope for right now. We've got one more video here. This is a video taken by one of our volunteers, Dan Bell, which is off Winnslie Parkway a year ago, with a shot down the corridor and just sort of an idea of say, okay, this is what we've got ahead to take care of and to expand. And I want to thank our volunteers and donors. Everything you've seen tonight exists because individuals in this neighborhood care enough to give their time and energy and their financial support. I want to thank the other board members of Winnslie Parkway, my husband Roy Wesley, and Tim Gillengerton, as well as past board members Robert Banya and David Barnett. I also want to be thankful to our design and planning leaders, Stephen Christie, David Byer, and Anna Arbetter, our head gardener, Keith Clausen, Shanmeyer Landscape, NeighborSpace, Ben Helphand, the Greater Ravenswood Chamber of Commerce, Gene Wagendorf III and Christina Peche. I'd also want to thank the 47th Ward Alderman Matt Martin and Josh Mark, the Chicago Department of Planning and Development Meg Gustafson, our 7th District Senator Mike Simmons, Ravenswood Neighbors Association, Michael Sewell and Andy Smerzak, Northeast Ravenswood District, run by Barbara Cooper for many years, Transit Tees Incorporated, and the Union Pacific Railroad for allowing us to lease space from them. And we hope to develop a stronger relationship with them in the future. So this has been the Winnslie Parkway story, once in a lifetime. Thank you.